This first episode with the title Journey and Route Confirmed is the most lengthy one in this sub-series. And since I want to be respectful to you and your time, I've included a couple of provisions. First, timestamps. If you want to skip certain parts of this video, you can do so easily by using the timestamps provided on the screen and also in the description box. So this was the first provision. The second provision is add-on videos. I've condensed this video to the absolute minimum, so you get the core of the message. Still, there are more information which I believe to be important. And therefore, I've included those additional information into separate add-on videos which go into more depth in certain areas. And therefore, you can selectively choose whether or not the additional information are of relevance for you. The link for those add-on videos will appear again on the screen and also in the description box. With that being said, let's get started with this first episode, Journey and Route Confirmed. We start with a general backdrop. In the beginning of the year 2018, I had been at work for about 3.5 years as an engineer in the automobile industry, and I realized that I had to quit my job. The reasons for that were manifold, the predominant one being severe overload at work. A new project constellation had arisen which put way too much weight on my shoulders. The workload was just way too high. And since my appeal to the top did not resolve the situation, I realized that I had to quit. Otherwise, I would burn out within a matter of a year or so, like at least one colleague of mine had before. And as you can maybe imagine, this realization led me into a quite desperate situation. On the one hand, I could not stay. On the other hand, I had no idea where else to go. For me, it was clear I cannot remain in this industry. And so I intensified my efforts of looking for a way out of my hamster wheel. I went out into nature a lot, praying, asking God for guidance what to do. And so at some point, I think it was during one of those many prayer walks, I remembered a dream of mine. I remembered the dream of hitchhiking to Australia. Now, this dream of mine had not been a dream in the sense of I was sleeping and then I had a dream. It had been a dream in the sense of I really would like to do this. Not the hitchhiking part, but the seeing of Australia part. The idea of hitchhiking had been born during my studies for becoming a mechanical engineer due to the lack of financial resources. I simply didn't have the money to travel to Australia. And so I thought as a student, why not just take a semester off and let's see how far I can go. But ultimately, I had never taken practical steps towards this dream, and therefore it had never happened. Now, back in 2018, I actually had the money. I could have simply bought a ticket to Australia and back. But in the end, I decided to stick with the original plan of hitchhiking for a number of benefits. For once, it would give me time to think. Time to think of what to do with the rest of my life. Since I was already too old at this point for a working holiday visa, which would have given me plenty of time in Australia, I was now left with the only option of a simple tourist visa, which would only allow me to stay for 3 months. And this wouldn't have been enough time for me. So this journey, hitchhiking to Australia, would buy me precious time to think. The second benefit of this journey was that it would enable me to see a couple of things. Not only Australia, this is obvious, but also other parts of this beautiful planet. Furthermore, it would enable me to see friends of mine. I had friends in Papua New Guinea, which I wanted to see for a long time. I also had friends in India and Indonesia. And so I thought, why not just connect the dots and make a journey out of it? And then finally, this journey would provide me with plenty of opportunities to see good fruit. Not fruit in the sense of exotic fruit which you can taste and see in other parts of the world, but fruit in the sense of how the Bible talks about fruit. The Bible mentions in multiple places that good fruit is an important mark of a disciple, of a Christian. Jesus talks about this, for example, in John chapter 15, that we have to stay connected to Him, to the vine, and that this will then result in us bearing good and lots of fruit. This journey, hitchhiking to Australia, would provide for me plenty of opportunities to speak to people, to share the gospel, to pray for people, to also practically help people, and therefore it would provide for me plenty of opportunities to see good fruit. Now, those were the two first benefits of this journey. Time to think and seeing a couple of things. They are easy to understand and not too much explanation is needed. On the third benefit of this journey, I have to elaborate on a little bit more. The third benefit of this journey was that it would provide for me the real possibility of finding my life, if necessary, by losing it. What do I mean by that? Let's look at the three routes, which I considered as options, and let's overlay them on a map. And not just any map, but the World Watch List. The World Watch List is published by Open Doors. Open Doors is a global organization which evaluates each year the level of persecution a Christian will have to expect in any given country. And I consider the data as reliable. Open Doors is very transparent about the methodology they use to establish their numbers. And they've also been refining the methodology for a couple of decades now. So again, I consider the data as reliable. If you do not trust the numbers they establish, travel to those countries and see for yourself, like I have. It is real, it is palpable, you can experience it, even as a tourist. Now, what you will notice is that all routes, which I considered as options, run through three main countries: Iran, Pakistan, and India, which ranked number 10, number 5, and number 11 on the World Watch List. Translated, this means that a Christian will have to expect extreme levels of persecution. Or, speaking in more practical terms, for an openly professing Christian, like I am, those places can be life-threatening. And this choice of mine, to consider those routes, had not been made in ignorance. I had checked the World Watch List for 2018 before the start of my journey, and I didn't try to avoid those countries. Not that I wanted to get myself killed on purpose, that was not the case. But I was fine with the thought of dying on this journey. For two very simple reasons. For once, I was to a certain degree fed up with life. And number two, I believed that I was ready to go. I had been what the Bible describes as born again. Jesus talks about this in John chapter 3, that we cannot enter the kingdom of God unless we are born again. And I had also tried to be faithful with the gifts that God had entrusted to me. So again, I believed that I was ready to go. I mean, when you think about this, if this entire Christianity thing is true, what better way to go than while and maybe even because you are confessing Christ as your Lord and Savior? Especially considering the fact that you will lose your life anyways at some point, and that holding on to it is futile in the long run. This last point, this last benefit of the journey, I think brings home the condition that I was in. I was exhausted, desperate, tired of all the uncertainties, especially in the area of work in my life. And all in all, I believed that I could only win with this endeavor. So I roughly defined the framework for my journey to Australia. Hitchhiking as far as possible, I mentioned this already. General direction east-southeast, with the 3 intermediate stops in India, Indonesia, and Papua New Guinea. 5 euros per day, so this was my goal, not to spend more than 5 euros per day. And the certain time frames for my visa. So I acquired the visa for Iran, Pakistan, and India beforehand because I didn't want to get stuck on my journey waiting for the granting of a visa. And that was pretty much it. This general backdrop, that I've now shared with you will become especially important in the end of this video when I talk about the fallout of the incident that I'm about to share with you in this episode. But it's also important to know this general backdrop now, before we move on into the immediate context of the incident that not only confirmed for me this journey, but even my route. It's July 13th, 2018, first day on the road, and I was so not ready for this journey. I even wrote this down in my traveling journal. As you are certainly aware, there are different types of personalities. Some people like adventurous ways of traveling, like hitchhiking, and others, they simply don't. As for me, by birth and also by trade, I'm a person who prefers to plan ahead. I mentioned already that I had been an engineer in the past. What I should also mention at this point, because it shaped my mind and also my personality quite extensively, is that I had been a pilot. This was the one thing, the one and only thing, that I wanted to do commercially as a career. But in the end, I could only obtain a private license because of health reasons. Now, there's one thing which is characteristic about both of those occupations. It is mandatory to plan ahead, not optional. It is mandatory. You've got to have a very structured way of conducting things, and being spontaneous and improvising, you only do when it is absolutely necessary or when something has gone wrong. So it will not come as a surprise to you when I tell you now that I had conducted some test runs with hitchhiking before the start of my journey. And they had gone reasonably well. Still, at the beginning of my journey, I was very tense and not at all ready. I will now summarize the first couple of days on the road very briefly. First day, 2 rides, about 150 kilometers to the south, to the city of Karlsruhe. Then 1 night on the street. And after that 1 night on the street, I got stuck in Karlsruhe for almost 2 days. This didn't bother me too much on the first day. But this changed when afternoon turned into evening on the second day. I mean, think about the statistics here. You've got a journey ahead of you which is about 20,000 kilometers. Then you get stuck after the first day on the road for almost 2 days. And you haven't even traveled 200 kilometers, not even 1% of the overall distance. If there has ever been a bad statistic, this is it. With troubling thoughts in my mind, I changed locations. I tried to hitchhike someplace else, only to realize that the new location was even worse. So I decided to go back. But before I went back, I sat down and I had a talk with God. I told him how I felt, that I was tired, exhausted, insecure. Insecurity was also a huge factor at the beginning of my journey. I pretty much told him everything that went on in my head. And then I asked him for a confirmation of this journey. I asked him for a sign that this journey was his will for my life and not just my own idea. If it was not his will for my life, I would have quit straight away. This was not the way I wanted to continue this journey with this insecurity in the back of my mind. And even many Christians don't talk to God like this. With the expectation that he can, and not only that he can, but that he wants and actually will speak to us directly. I, on the other hand, I believe that he does. And I furthermore believe that God takes us seriously in every area of life, also in prayer, the same way we take him seriously. So I finished my prayer, and I was about to return to my previous hitchhiking spot. But before I returned, I checked my phone. And on my phone, I found a message from my brother John. John and I, we are brethren by birth, so we have the same parents. And he relayed to me a message from a brother in the Lord. So this brother and I, we are brethren by faith. We believe in the same God. I barely knew this brother and he barely knew me. We had met only once, about a week prior. We had studied God's word together, we had prayed together, and therefore he knew something about my convictions and also about my journey to Australia that I was about to embark on. So this brother in the Lord, he sent a message to my brother John and told him to relay this message to me. The message was pretty much only one Bible verse, Isaiah 54 verse 9. I will read it from the NIV. The original message was in German, of course. To me, so this is God speaking here, to me this is like the days of Noah, when I swore that the waters of Noah would never again cover the earth. So now I have sworn not to be angry with you, never to rebuke you again. And then it says it's from Simon from the Life Team. This message, it didn't mean much to me at first. For sure, it is a comforting verse. But I had a very practical situation at hand. Should I continue this journey or should I abort? What was this verse supposed to tell me? So again, this verse didn't mean much to me at first, if anything at all. But this would change dramatically within the next couple of hours. So I went back to my previous hitchhiking spot. Again, nothing for about an hour. Then a young guy turned up in his small car. The license plate number gave it away that he would probably drive into the direction in which I needed to go. So I approached him, asked whether or not I could ride along, and he finally agreed to take me. I would just have to wait for a little while because he was meeting somebody at the train station. I was absolutely fine with waiting. At this point, he could have told me to wait for an hour, and this would have been fine with me. I was just happy that things were moving again. So I waited, and after this young guy had returned from the train station, we left Karlsruhe and entered the highway towards the east. Now, while we were driving, we were of course talking. This is the one thing which is so rewarding about hitchhiking. You are meeting lots of people who are, for the most part, willing to talk to you about anything. So our small talk was replaced rather quickly by a deep and meaningful conversation. I was totally immersed in this conversation, and therefore I wasn't even paying attention to what was going on outside the car. Besides, there wasn't much to be seen outside. The usual traffic jam in the evening and lots of rain. The entire day had been a back and forth between rain and sunshine, rain and sunshine, rain and sunshine. At some point, the rain got lighter and lighter until the sun finally broke through the clouds. And what do you get when sunlight and rain front come together? You get a rainbow. The rainbow we saw was amazing in 3 ways. For once, it was one of the brightest rainbows we had ever seen. Maybe you can therefore understand why I'm a little bit hesitant to share this picture with you. Because I can see that this picture is absolutely not impressive. It does, however, not do justice to what we saw. Maybe it is because I took the picture through the windscreen. Maybe it is because of my old camera. Maybe it is because the lens wasn't clean. I don't know. But what I do know is that I wasn't the only one in awe of this rainbow. Also my driver was. This was one of the brightest rainbows we had ever seen. The second way in which this rainbow was amazing, it was standing like a gate above the highway. And that from multiple perspectives. We approached the rainbow in a left-hand turn, and from multiple perspectives, it looked like we had to drive through a real gate. And then the third way in which this rainbow was amazing, because of the immediate context of that day and its connection to Noah. Maybe you picked up on this. In Isaiah 54 verse 9, the verse that had been shared with me by this brother in the Lord, the name of Noah was mentioned 2 times. When I saw this rainbow, it took me a couple of seconds. But then I remembered wait, there was something special about this verse. Noah was mentioned 2 times. This is just me. Patterns within a picture, a poem, a song, and scripture, they usually get my attention. It is just the way my brain is wired. Now, some of you might not be familiar with the story of Noah, and therefore you might ask, well, what is the connection between Noah and the rainbow? Therefore, I will share with you a brief summary of the story of Noah while showing you some pictures from a children's Bible, so you also have something for the eyes to see. Starting in Genesis chapter 6, we read that God at some point, after having created the earth good, looked at his creation only to see that it was corrupted by mankind and full of evil. Here on this page you can see a couple of examples of that evil, which include, among others, idolatry, murder, and theft. And the Bible states that God regretted that he had created humanity. Only one person with his family was found to be righteous in God's eyes: Noah. And so God decided to tell Noah how he would be dealing with this situation. He would destroy the entire world with a global flood in order to make a fresh start with only Noah and his family. He commanded him to build an ark, a huge ship, in which he, his family, and the animals after their kinds would survive the flood. Fast forward a couple of decades, Noah had built the ark, and what God had told him finally came to pass. God flooded the entire earth and erased all human life from it, except for those who were on the ark. Fast forward a couple of months, the rain had stopped. Those who were on the ark had to wait for the floodwaters to recede. And once the floodwaters had receded, the ark came to rest on a mountain called Ararat. Noah, his family, and the animals left the ark, and then God made a promise to Noah and mankind. He would never again erase all life from earth through a global flood. And now pay close attention. The rainbow in the sky would mark this promise as a sign for all generations to come. Back to this day in 2018, to my journey to Australia. I saw this rainbow and my mind made the connection very, very quick. Remember, earlier that day I had asked God for a confirmation that he was with me on this journey. I asked him for a sign that this journey was his will for my life and not just my own idea. Then I pretty much instantly received this Bible verse, Isaiah 54 verse 9, which contained the name of Noah 2 times. Then I finally found a ride after being stuck in Karlsruhe for almost 2 days. And I found this ride within a matter of not even an hour. And then on the ride we saw this amazing rainbow. The rainbow which was so intense and which you do not see every day in southern Germany. The rainbow which was standing like a gate above the highway. Which, when you think about this, what is the purpose of a gate? It guides and it shows the way to enter. And then the rainbow, which is classified as a sign by God for all generations in the story of Noah, Genesis 9 verses 12 to 13. I think this is remarkable. Also back then in 2018, I thought this is remarkable. I saw this series of events as a possible confirmation, as a possible sign from God that he was with me on this journey. However, and I want to be very clear about this, it could also have been coincidence. I'm very careful not to be too quick to attribute something to the speaking of God. So I quietly thank God for this rainbow, for this encouragement, and we drove on without me telling my driver what had just happened. At some point I asked this young guy where he was from. He was speaking German fluently, but I noticed that his skin color was slightly darker than that of the average German. He replied that his parents were from Armenia. Now, before my journey around the world, I couldn't have even placed Armenia on a map. and I also knew close to nothing about this country. This had changed due to the preparations for my journey. And pretty much instantly, a bell went off in my head when I heard this young guy telling me that his parents were from Armenia. The reason for that was that Mount Ararat and also the story of Noah are very close to the Armenian people. For once, geographically speaking. Until the 20th century, Mount Ararat had been part of Armenia, which sadly changed in the context of war and genocide. But not only geographically speaking are Mount Ararat and the story of Noah close to the Armenian people. They are also very close to the hearts of the Armenian people. And I will show you now just how close they really are. What you see here on the screen is the coat of arms. In German it's called Wappenzeichen. So this is kind of like the state symbol of Armenia. By the way, this is the website of the President of the Republic of Armenia. So it doesn't get more official than this. Regarding the coat of arms, we will obviously not talk about all the symbolisms here due to time constraints. Instead, we will just focus on the central part of it. And in order so we can do that better, I've enhanced this part of the picture for you. What you see here is Mount Ararat in the background. In front of Mount Ararat, the floodwaters. And on top of Mount Ararat, you can see Noah's Ark. So the big ship which he built and which, according to the Bible, came to rest on this mountain. It is needless to say, something which is depicted in the center, on the heart of a coat of arms, is of tremendous importance for the country, which not only chose the symbols, but also the location of those symbols. So you can already see here, this story of Noah and Mount Ararat seem to have a central part in the national identity of Armenia. One more item I would like to show you, just so you grasp the fact that this was not a rare exception. What you see here is a silver coin, 1 ounce of silver to be precise. And it not only contains precious metal, it also contains beautiful engravings on each side. On the outer ring of the one side, you can see the words Republic of Armenia written in the English and also in the Armenian alphabet. In the center, you can see, again, the coat of arms. We've just talked about this. And for me, it is amazing to see how many details an engraver can incorporate into such a small coin. However, there are of course limitations to that. And therefore you can barely recognize Mount Ararat and Noah's Ark on the coat of arms here. Maybe this is the reason why the creators of this Armenian coin chose the motive for the flip side the way they did. In the center of the flip side, you have in the background Mount Ararat, the floodwaters, Noah's Ark, and in the foreground you have the dove, which carries an olive leaf in its beak. The dove, as a side note, is also part of the flood account, which we can read in the Bible, in the book of Genesis. On the outer ring, you can read the words Noah's Ark, written again in the English and also in the Armenian alphabet. This coin, and also the coat of arms, are beautiful reminders of how important this mountain and the story of Noah are to the Armenian people. It is not an exaggeration to say that it is part of their national identity, even though the mountain is now located on the other side of the Turkish-Armenian border. So, coming back to my story in 2018. For me, the word Armenia was pretty much synonymous with Noah and Mount Ararat. I knew that Mount Ararat had a very special place in the hearts of the Armenian people, that many even regard it as a holy mountain. What you should also know is where Armenia and in particular Mount Ararat are located. Pretty much exactly at my intended and finally also traveled route. I had at this point decided to travel the southern route through Turkey, which in fact would lead me so close to Mount Ararat that I would see it sky high, roughly 1 month later. So on my journey, I had prayed this prayer. I know I'm repeating myself here. I'm doing this on purpose because I want you to get the full picture. On my journey, I had prayed this prayer. I had asked God for a confirmation that He was with me on this journey. I had asked Him for a sign that this journey was His will for my life and not just my own idea. Then I pretty much instantly received this Bible verse, Isaiah 54 verse 9, which contained the name of Noah 2 times. Then I finally found a ride after being stuck in Karlsruhe for almost 2 days. And I found this ride within a matter of not even an hour. And then on that ride, those two things happened. We saw this amazing rainbow. The rainbow which was so intense and which you do not see every day in southern Germany. The rainbow which was standing like a gate above the highway. The rainbow which is classified as a sign by God for all generations in the story of Noah. And then I learned that my driver had his roots in Armenia, the country which was pretty much synonymous to me with Noah and Mount Ararat because of its geographical and also emotional connection to it. Mount Ararat, the mountain which was located so close to my intended traveling route that I would see it sky high, roughly 1 month later. To me, this was no coincidence anymore. This was a significant series of events. This was intentional speaking of God. God had not only confirmed that He was with me on this journey, He had even confirmed my intended traveling route. So after I realized what had just happened, I thought it was now time to talk. So I shared the events of that day with my driver. He became quiet for some time. And I was just, giving him time to think. I hope that he understood what I had tried to communicate to him. Then he told me something, and I knew then that he had indeed understood. Here his words as exactly as I can remember them. He said, "You know what? Not only that. My name is Noyan. It is directly derived from the name Noah." And after he had said this, he turned his back towards me while he was driving. On the back of his Arsenal London soccer jersey, his name was written in bold letters. Noyan. I could smack myself sometimes for not taking a picture of this. At this moment, I just didn't think of this. Now, some might say Noyan and Noah, they sound a little bit alike. Okay. But how can I be sure that this is real? That there is really this connection between those two names without me having to invest lots of time for research? Well, for that, let's turn again to the silver coin I showed you earlier. You remember the one side of the coin which portrayed the flood account of Genesis? On the outer ring, and I mentioned this before, Noah's Ark is written in the English and also in the Armenian alphabet. So let us Google Translate the Armenian part of the text, shall we? Take your smartphone, open the Google Translate app, open the camera and see what happens. What you will probably see is that the app has problems with curved texts. Therefore, I have straightened it out for you and put it on a separate page so nothing is interfering with your camera. I will give you now 3 seconds in which you can pause this video, scan the text on the screen, and then I will show you the result you will get. The Armenian letters will be transliterated, and they are transliterated into Noyan Tapan. Noyan Tapan. When you do a little bit of research on this phrase, you will find that Noyan Tapan in Armenian is defined as Noah's Ark. Exactly what is written on this coin in English. So Noyan means Noah's or of Noah. It is directly derived from the root word Noi, which is Armenian for Noah. When I share this story in a conversation, that person will usually fill in this last part by themselves. You know, the driver's name being Noah part. Then I know for sure that they have understood. And I hope that you have understood as well. Let us summarize the events of that day one more time so you get the fullness of the picture. On my journey, hitchhiking to Australia, I had prayed this prayer. I had asked God for confirmation that He was with me on this journey. I had asked Him for a sign that this journey was His will for my life and not just my own idea. Then I, pretty much instantly, received this Bible verse, Isaiah 54 verse 9, which contained the name of Noah 2 times. Then I finally found a ride after being stuck in Karlsruhe for almost 2 days. And I found this ride within a matter of not even an hour. And then on that ride, those 3 things happened. We saw this amazing rainbow, the rainbow which was so intense and which you do not see every day in southern Germany. The rainbow which was standing like a gate above the highway, which, when you think about this, what is the purpose of a gate? It guides and it shows the way to enter. The rainbow, which is classified as a sign by God for all generations in the context of the story of Noah, Genesis 9 verses 12 to 13. Then I learned that my driver had his roots in Armenia. Armenia, the country which to me was pretty much synonymous with Noah and Mount Ararat, because of its geographical and also emotional connection to it. Mount Ararat, the mountain which was located so close to my intended traveling route that I would see it sky high, roughly 1 month later. And then I finally learned that my driver's name was Noyan, an Armenian name which is directly derived from the name Noah. What are the odds? What are the odds of this incident occurring the way I described it to you? I think that most people will be able to tell just by their gut feeling that all of this was not coincidence. And so for a long time I was content with that gut feeling. But a couple of months ago I thought I should at least try to put some numbers on this series of events. You know, try to calculate the probabilities and also do this in an open and transparent manner so people can agree or disagree with my numbers and maybe even come up with their own calculations. So I did. I calculated the probabilities for the 3 events. For A, the rainbow in southern Germany, B, that somebody in Germany is from Armenia, and C, that somebody in Germany has the given name Noah or Noyan. I made 2 calculations. For once, a conservative calculation with values which are least favorable to the case I'm trying to make here for God speaking to me that day. And then I also made a plausible calculation with values which, as the word suggests, I believe to be plausible. I will not give you the exact numbers here in this video. For that, I will refer you to an add-on video with the title, What are the odds? In this video, you will find all the details how I established those numbers. Here and now, I will only give you the ballpark number, meaning the general magnitude we are talking about here. For the conservative calculation, 1 over 10 to the power of 5, so roughly 1 out of 100,000. And for the plausible calculation, 1 over 10 to the power of 6, so roughly 1 out of 1 million. I want to help you to get a feeling for those numbers. Let's just consider for a moment the conservative calculation, trying to be generous here for our atheist friends. I could spend the rest of my life and 2 additional full lifetimes, from my first day on earth until I'm 100 years old, every day on the streets of Karlsruhe, trying to get a ride towards the east. And those 3 events would not even happen one more time. I hope you got this. The chances of those three events reoccurring are remote, even when using a conservative approach. Now, some might say, okay, granted, that's unlikely. But it is still far more likely than winning the main prize in the German lottery. And regularly, some lucky individual wins the lottery. So this number is not so impressive after all. And I get that. I understand where you are coming from. But you are missing a huge factor here. You are missing the immediate context. This is the reason why I dedicated an entire section of this video to the immediate context, so you can rewatch it if necessary. I prayed this prayer. I asked God for a confirmation. I asked Him for a sign. Then I received this Bible verse, which contained the name of Noah 2 times. Then I finally found the rite. And then, on that rite, those three things, A, B, and C, happened. So for the immediate context, we will have to include a factor x into this equation. I have no idea how to calculate such a factor. But I can tell you one thing. It is gigantic. I can see only three ways how to discard this real-life story that I have now shared with you as major evidence for God still speaking today, which of course implies that He exists. Number one, reliability of the messenger, that I'm maybe a liar, that I made up this story out of thin air. Number two, embellishment over time. After all, the events of that story happened 6 years ago at the time of the recording, and maybe I have unwillingly exaggerated the events of that day. And number three, exclusion, also known as confirmation bias. You know, like Richard Dawkins, this flagship of modern day science, who rules out from the start that God speaks, because it would imply that He exists, and nothing would ever convince him that He does. For all three objections, I have responses. Response to objection number one, well, I guess you will have to get to know me then. Add-on video trustworthiness of the messenger. Response to objection number two, I would like to refer you to my video log, which I recorded during my journey to Australia, to inform my family that I am alive and well. I recorded the events I have shared with you in this episode the very next morning. So this objection can be ruled out conclusively. And my response to objection number three, I created a litmus test for confirmation bias. In the appendix to chapter 1 of my book, Destination Unknown, I tried to rewrite this real-life story into a fictional criminal case in which you are part of the jury. The one thing which I removed from this fictional criminal case is the God factor, meaning the question whether or not God was speaking to somebody in this story. Should you, as the objector to my conclusion that God was speaking to me in this real-life story, come to a different conclusion in that fictional criminal case, namely that the charged person is innocent, then you can be very sure that you are biased. And it would be a good thing for you to know that. The link for this chapter of my book you will find in the description box as well. We come to the last section of this episode, the fallout. What was the result of this Noah incident? For me, so this is the internal fallout, for me this incident was so encouraging and a huge energy boost. Because for me it was undeniable evidence for God being with me on this journey and for God still speaking today. He not only hears our prayers, but answers them in His divine sovereignty. He's not obligated to do that, but He chooses to do that. Sometimes very openly, sometimes a little bit more subtle. Even though this Noah incident was at first a very strenuous experience, I would not trade it for anything. Forget about all the riches in the world. I'm not interested. To know that the creator of the universe is with you, Nothing can compete with that. Furthermore, this incident, and following that the entire journey, finally gave me a sense of purpose for my life. I pray now regularly, God, please give me a little bit more time so I can finish those projects, the Cross and the Torah, and also this sub-series, God Speaks. Because I'm longing for those projects to bear good fruit for eternity. That's a huge difference when we remember the general backdrop in which I shared with you that I was fed up with life at the beginning of my journey to Australia, and that I was fine with the thought of dying on it. A lot more could be said about what this incident did for me personally, internally, but I want to keep this episode as short as possible. Therefore, check the description box for further add-on videos. At least one video will deal with the fact that the name Noah followed me all the way to Australia. It was like God was repeatedly reminding me, hey, remember, I'm with you. In closing, I would like to talk about the external fallout. So what this Noah incident did for other people. Over the course of 6 years, I have shared this story, this is my estimation, a couple of 100 times, either in writing or in personal conversations. And I've seen, therefore, the reactions of other people from different backgrounds, especially atheists. I saw, for example, the reaction of Noyan, who he definitely knew that something extraordinary was going on. I saw the reaction of the young couple, which drove me the following day, the very next day after this Noah incident, all the way from the Stuttgart area to Vienna in Austria. The list goes on and on and on. And it is almost as if I can hear the gears turning in their heads, regardless of whether or not they admit this. What if this is real? What if God really spoke to that guy? It would imply that he exists. It would imply that I will be accountable to him one day. So I see that this story, this Noah incident, was not only encouraging for me, but for others as well. Encouraging in the sense that it has the potential to spark the process of critically re-examining one's own worldview. A sound worldview should make sense from whatever perspective you look at it. Not only intellectually, not only historically, not only scientifically, but also personally. The God of the Bible describes himself as the living God, as a God who personally and directly interacts with his creation. I can testify to that claim, and many, many Christians around the world can testify to it as well. I hope that this first episode of this sub-series, God Speaks, was encouraging for you. Encouraging either to hold on to your faith in the God of the Bible, to hold on to your faith in Jesus Christ, or encouraging in the sense that you maybe take him more seriously and that you maybe re-examine your worldview and also your motives. Again, check the description box for further add-on videos. Once they are all recorded and published, we will continue with the second episode just in time for Eid Korban. Talk to you soon. Until next time, God bless.